Hey, before we get to the content, I want to remind you that Jimmy's Crossroads Club is now a thing. Just log on to members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com for this special opportunity to become a part of this venture. You'll also have access to exciting perks like the engraved Jimmy at the Crossroads harmonica with your name on it, a Jimmy at the Crossroads mug, and so much more. Log on, members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. So I want to talk a little bit about Joe Biden. Joe Biden running for president of the United States, bumbling Joe Biden, trying to keep it together when he's off teleprompter, but when he's on teleprompter, well, he can read a teleprompter pretty well. I want to start off with cut one, where yesterday, or a couple of days ago, he was giving a speech on the pandemic and the Trump administration's handling of it. Take a look at this.
On Monday, Donald Trump said, quote, "If we stopped testing right now for COVID-19, we'd have very few cases, if any. If we stopped testing now, we'd have very few cases, if any." It's a statement that's not only absurd, it's absolutely tragic. Yesterday, the head of the White House Task Force on Coronavirus, the vice president, claimed success in the fight because deaths are, quote, down to fewer than 750 a day. 750 fathers and mothers, sisters and brothers, uncles, aunts, husbands, wives, children dying every day. More than 20,000 a month. That's greater than World War II level casualties each month. That's more than 5 9/11s each month. And this administration is engaging in self-congratulations. Maybe good enough for Donald Trump, but it'll never, ever be acceptable if I'm your president.
So Joe Biden, trying to stake claim to the idea that President Trump has failed in terms of managing the pandemic. I will say that there are imperfections and problems and issues in terms of some of the ways in which President Trump has conducted himself in terms of this pandemic as a pandemic manager. But more than the policies, more than the steps that he's been taking, which have overall been fine, not perfect, problems, issues to be sure, but it's much more been about his tweeting than anything else, creating the perception that you have sort of pandemic management chaos in the Trump administration. I think it's much more been perception than reality, although there have been some flaws. The testing does need to be ramped up still more than it had been in the past. But by and large, that's the biggest reason why we're seeing so many cases still being reported, is because a hell of a lot more people are being tested. So even that criticism of President Trump has its limits, shall we say. But what Biden is trying to present is this picture that he is the guy who can handle management of this crisis, or a crisis, but especially pandemic management. And if you watch Biden when he's off of teleprompter, if you watch Joe Biden when he has to think off the cuff and answer questions, you get really concerned about his ability in the heat of the moment to quickly address a question, to properly present his answer in a coherent fashion. I mean, this is a guy who I think legitimately people are talking about, does he have some kind of dementia to him? Not as just a joking derision, but as a serious question. People on the left were asking that very question about Joe Biden because of the way in which he bumbles his way through an interview, through a conversation, through a speech without having a teleprompter present. I mean, I used to think Obama had it bad when he was just That was what Obama was known for, in my book, when it came to off-the-cuff speaking. But at least he was forming coherent sentences on a consistent basis. He just kept throwing a lot of uhs and ums like an untrained speaker, which, of course, he's not an untrained speaker. But when he wasn't reading from a teleprompter, he couldn't have it together in terms of uhs and ums, but he could at least put the sentences together in the end. Biden, you have to wonder. So while he's able to present a good speech and compellingly make the case, hey, I'm the guy who can manage a pandemic, listen to my written speech as I give it to you, it's a very different story. But let's go to cut 2 here, because this shows the way in which Biden would operate this sort of pandemic. Keep in mind, Biden is a guy who wasn't happy with the protesters who said, we need to be let free, reopen America. He knocked those protesters, and he was very supportive of, and continues to be supportive of, some of the more stringent measures that states have taken across the country. And yet, at the same time, he's turned out very supportive of the Black Lives Matter protests. Well, here is Joe Biden talking about President Trump's planned rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, this coming Saturday.
Instead of leading the charge to defeat the virus, he just basically waved a white flag and has retreated. He's so eager to get back on his campaign, to his campaign rallies, that he'll put people at risk, as everyone's pointed out, in violation of the CDC guidelines that still warn against large gatherings, as long as he's going to allow this to happen. But he's ready to do it as long as, notwithstanding CDC guidance, as long as the people showing up sign a waiver promising they'll not hold the campaign liable.
Look, I don't think President Trump should hold this rally on Saturday. I think more than anything, optically, it's not good for him. I understand the basis. Let me rev up my base, do one of these rallies, get a lot of people there. We need to regenerate some excitement. But this is going to be a rally that people will watch. Look, I was at President Trump's rally in Colorado Springs, Colorado in February. And the president fired up the crowd. He put on a show. I said at the time that this is a showman trying to give you the best political show, if not the best show on earth. And that's what he's doing. He's playing to the in-person crowd. And I never understood that before going to the rally. So I get that. I have that in mind. But this is a rally that is going to be an instance where he's speaking to the whole country, where the media will be watching, will be looking at all of his word choices. He better not slip up doing off the cuffs, because while the media is going to nitpick everything, this would be an unforced error in the sense that, okay, he'd be enthusiastic, energetic, rev up the crowd, be entertaining, but that doesn't mean that you should, at this moment, open yourself up to that level of potential criticism, optically and otherwise, because you never know what the president's going to say. So my view is he shouldn't do the rally on Saturday, but Biden's a hell of a guy to talk about this kind of a rally and saying, no, you shouldn't go, when you have significant, massive protests that have been happening, and he's been supportive of them for weeks. We've had the funeral and memorial services, multiple, for George Floyd. There wasn't much social distancing going on, masks or not. And Joe Biden was supportive of those protests and non-critical. He's a hell of a guy to talk. But that speech excerpt that we just heard from Biden, where he said Trump waved the white flag of surrender, which is interesting because before, in the previous clip, didn't he say that Trump claimed victory? You can't claim victory and surrender at the same time. It's one or the other. Either you're victorious or you're surrendering. And Trump, I would say, is claiming more victory, at least enough to say we can start getting back to normal and have businesses take different steps, different precautions, what have you. But the reality is that the way in which Joe Biden's talking about this, white flag of surrender, we need to keep things strict, but hey, we're going to give a pass to these protesters, but not these protesters. We want to give an okay to the right cause getting together to call for change versus people wanting to rally together with President Trump. Maybe you could be consistent in that way and say both. You shouldn't do both, as opposed to just saying Trump shouldn't do his rally, but these protesters are okay. You have to be consistent in that way. Joe Biden's not. Joe Biden is very restrictive. Joe Biden would be a terrible pandemic manager. Thank God Joe Biden is not president of the United States right now. I mean, you go to cut 3 here. This is Biden, I think yesterday, where he said a couple of ideas, presented a couple of ideas of his own for how he would handle the reopening of America. And I think this also underscores not only the pandemic failure, but also the fact that he could not be a good person on the economy.
I think we should establish, and I will establish, what we call a pandemic testing board, not unlike what Roosevelt did in a different circumstance, a national testing board during the Depression, to surge testing nationwide and ramp up the production and fair distribution of the PPE. Were I in office, I would be taking $25 billion, putting essentially a vaccine czar in charge. When, God willing, we get this vaccine, how will it be distributed? Where will it go? How will it get there? How will we guarantee that it will be able to be distributed in a way that all Americans have equal access to it?
First of all, I don't know why he doesn't just take the mask off completely. I mean, what does he gain from just hanging it down off of his ear? But with that said, that's his idea. Having some sort of just simply testing and getting vaccine ramped up and having the government micromanage the distribution of the vaccine at the federal level. That's it. That's what he wants to do economically. Those are the crux points of his economic plan. Okay, I understand. Fine. If you want to ramp up testing more, we should do more of it. Beneficial. Vaccine, okay. But I know a heck of a lot of people who don't want to try a vaccine right when it's released, who want to wait, give it a little bit of time, and the idea also that you're going to be able to just generate a safe vaccine in short order has always been, whether it's Trump claiming it or Biden, it's always been premature to make that claim. But bottom line is Joe Biden would not be the right kind of economic manager in addition to pandemic manager that we would need in any way, shape, or form. And then you get to race relations. This is the guy who was responsible for the 1994 crime bill. This was a guy who said, if you don't support him and you're black, well, you ain't black. This is a guy who has made comment after comment after comment. The idea that he's going to be good on bringing people together and mending fences and addressing the tension across the country with regards to race seems absurd to me. Now, I will say that in that regard, I don't think that President Trump has presented the best front in terms of trying to mend those fences either. And from a messaging standpoint, I don't think the president has hit the marks in a lot of ways. But here's the reality. I was talking about this last night with a friend. President Trump, more than anything, was elected to boost the economy, to bring us back into a strong economy, and he did that through policies, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and the deregulation. I think the trade war was problematic, but nevertheless, overall, this president helped to bring back the economy from the doldrums of Barack Obama. Now we are in a recession because of this pandemic and because of all the shutdowns. We need somebody who understands what's necessary in order to bring us back. Again, that is President Trump. Trump checks the marker overall of the economy. The other two things that people are looking for right now, pandemic response, mixed for President Trump. Biden would be horrible with that. Much too restrictive, crush the economy. massively expand the size and scope of government, much worse than Trump could ever be on pandemic response. And neither of them particularly good in terms of the racial divisions. So basically, if you look at those three things, you've got 1.5 for Trump and 0 for Biden. And then you've got Biden. We showed this clip the other day, and let's wrap up here. Cut 4, Joe Biden making claims that are absolutely asinine, ludicrous, unsubstantiated, that President Donald Trump, if he loses re-election, will have to be escorted out of the White House.
And let me ask you this, and I know this is a strange question to ask an American politician, maybe easier around the world, but have you ever considered what would happen if the election result came out as you being the winner and Trump refused to leave?
Yes, I have. I was so damn proud. Here you have 4 chiefs of staff coming out and ripping the skin off of Trump. And you have so many rank and file military personnel saying, whoa, we're not a military state. This is not who we are. I promise you, I'm absolutely convinced they will escort him from the White House with great dispatch.
This is the same guy who's considering Gretchen Whitmer the terrible, the tyrannical, in Michigan for vice president. And he's the one who's saying, oh my gosh, police state of President Trump, who has to be removed from the White House. That's absurd, unsubstantiated, and asinine. We talked about this yesterday. Joe Biden has far too many flaws, far too many issues. You may not like President Trump in a heck of a lot of ways. I've had my issues with him time and time again in a variety of different areas. But you put those two up against each other on policy, on competency, on capabilities, and especially when you look at economy, pandemic management, and race relations, you put all those things together, Joe Biden just doesn't measure up. He's got far too many problems that will never be addressed. That much is clear. Thanks for watching this clip from Jimmy at the Crossroads. You do not want to miss a minute of engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe today to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel, and you'll be sure to catch our live broadcast. I appreciate your support.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of no sense. Yeah.